On the morning of October 17th, in a quiet cafe on the Florianigasse in Vienna, a young woman with mousy brown hair sketched the intricate ironwork of a nearby window box into a worn leather-bound notebook. To any casual observer, she was Anna Fischer, a postgraduate art history student from Graz, utterly absorbed in her research on the architectural nuances of the Josefstadt district. Her focus was absolute, her hand steady. Yet her eyes, which appeared to be tracing the delicate floral patterns of the iron, were in fact cataloging the reflections in the cafe's plate glass window, monitoring the pedestrian traffic and noting the license plate of every vehicle that paused for more than 3 seconds. Anna Fischer did not exist. She was a meticulously constructed legend, a shell identity inhabited by an operative of a discreet European intelligence service. And her true purpose in Vienna had nothing to do with art and everything to do with a ghost. For 6 months, her life had been a performance of calculated mundanity. All of it a prelude to a fleeting moment that might occur today, tomorrow, or a month from now, when she would be required to get within arm's length of a man known only as Silas, a courier who was the sole physical link in a communication chain, and that threatened to unleash coordinated violence across the continent. The problem confronting the service, which for the purposes of this record was designated Directorate 7, was one of insidious modernity. A splinter cell, ideologically descended from the remnants of older, more familiar extremist groups, but technologically far more sophisticated, had established a communications network that was, for all practical purposes, a black hole. Initial attempts at electronic interception had yielded nothing but layers of bespoke, quantum-resistant encryption that the Directorate's most advanced decryption arrays could not penetrate. The cell, referred to internally as the Hydra network for its decentralized and regenerative nature, had learned from the mistakes of its predecessors. They had abandoned commercial messaging platforms, eschewed conventional internet traffic, and built a closed system that communicated in minute, heavily obfuscated data bursts disguised as benign system noise within global telecommunication backbones. The Directorate's Signals Intelligence Division, a behemoth of processing power and human talent, was effectively blind. This digital impenetrability forced a strategic regression to older, more tangible methods of intelligence gathering. It was deduced through painstaking analysis of fragmented intelligence from allied services that the network, while digitally secure, still relied on a physical component for its most critical instructions: the distribution of operational funds, targeting directives, and cryptographic keys. This component was a human courier, a ghost who moved between European capitals, carrying packages that were outwardly innocuous, but contained the lifeblood of the organization. The failure of conventional methods had created a strategic imperative of the highest order. The prevailing intelligence assessment, based on chatter from a single, low-level human source cultivated over 2 years, indicated that the Hydra network was in the final planning stages for a series of simultaneous mass casualty attacks. The stakes were no longer theoretical. They were measured in the potential for hundreds of civilian lives lost and the destabilization of public order in at least 3 major European cities. The need for a breakthrough was absolute, justifying an operation of extraordinary risk and unconventional design. The target of the operation was not, in the traditional sense, a man, but rather a function, a methodology embodied by a series of individuals who passed through the role of courier. The current iteration, the man codenamed Silas, was the most disciplined and effective the Directorate had yet encountered. He was a phantom, existing only in the brief, anonymized transactions he conducted. Psychological profiling, constructed from the thinnest of observational data, suggested a man of immense self-control, likely with a background in military or intelligence work, where operational security was an ingrained reflex. He never used electronic devices, paid for all transactions in cash, and never established a routine. His movements were deliberately erratic, designed to defeat predictive analysis. He might take a train from Vienna to Prague, only to disembark at a small, intermediate stop and double back on a local bus, a tactic designed to sever any potential surveillance tail. The challenge was not in identifying a face in a crowd, but in understanding and predicting the operational logic of a system designed for ultimate discretion. The environment he moved through was the dense, anonymous tapestry of urban Europe. He utilized public libraries, bustling train stations, and crowded market squares as his operational theaters, places where an individual could disappear into the background noise of humanity. He favored dead drops of a classical design. A newspaper left on a park bench, a book returned to a specific shelf in a second-hand bookshop, a package left in a temporary storage locker. These methods were centuries old, but remained brutally effective against modern, technology-reliant surveillance. Silas represented a systemic challenge. He was the physical manifestation of the Hydra network's core principle of compartmentalization and anonymity. To intercept him was to risk alerting the entire network, which would simply sever the compromised link and regenerate another. To leave him untouched was to allow the flow of lethal instructions to continue unabated. The operational problem was therefore one of exquisite difficulty. How to track the package without alerting the courier, and how to follow the information without ever laying a hand on the man who carried it. The solution proposed by the Directorate's Special Operations Planning Unit was audacious in its simplicity and terrifying in its technical and human requirements. It was codenamed Operation Midas, a grimly ironic reference to the mythical king whose touch turned everything to gold. In this case, the operative's touch would turn an object into a trackable asset. The plan rejected any attempt to intercept, detain, or even overtly surveil Silas himself. Instead, the entire operational focus was narrowed to a single, high-risk objective: to physically tag the package he was carrying with a substance that was both undetectable by him and trackable by the Directorate. This required engineering a scenario in which an operative could make physical contact with the package, a brush pass of such subtlety that it would register to the target as nothing more than the incidental contact of a crowded urban space. The concept relied on a confluence of perfect intelligence, flawless environmental manipulation, and the unique skills of a deep cover operative. The obstacles were immense. First, the intelligence had to be precise enough to predict not just the city, but the specific location and a narrow time window for Silas's next dead drop. Second, the technical challenge of creating a tracking technology that was passive, invisible, and immune to conventional electronic countermeasures was significant. Third, the human element was the most critical and fragile. The operative would need to operate alone, without immediate support, and execute a single, precise physical action under immense psychological pressure. The risk of exposure was catastrophic. If Silas detected the attempt, he would vanish. The source of the intelligence would likely be compromised and executed, and the Hydra network would accelerate its attack timeline, knowing it was being actively hunted. The plan was a high-wire act with no safety net, a single-shot solution to a problem that had baffled the Directorate's most powerful technical divisions for over a year. It was approved on the condition of absolute deniability. If it failed, it never happened. The technological keystone of Operation Midas was a tracking marker that defied conventional definitions. The Directorate's Q branch, its internal research and development division, had been working on passive locational identifiers for several years. and this operation provided the first critical field application. They eschewed any form of radio frequency or GPS-based technology, as these emitted signals that were vulnerable to detection by even commercially available bug sweepers. The solution they developed was rooted in nuclear science. They synthesized a microscopic quantity of a specific, non-naturally occurring radioisotope, lutetium-177, which had a conveniently short half-life of just 6.7 days. This short half-life was crucial. It ensured the marker would become inert and effectively vanish after a week, leaving no forensic trace, but provided a long enough window to conduct the tracking operation. The isotope emitted a unique, low-energy gamma radiation signature that was harmless to a human carrier, but could be detected by highly sensitive, purpose-built spectrometers. The quantity of the isotope used was infinitesimal, measured in picograms, and was suspended within a specially formulated transparent, odorless, and quick-drying adhesive. The adhesive itself was a marvel of chemical engineering, designed to have a tactile signature identical to that of water, ensuring that if any transferred to the target's skin, it would feel like nothing more than a drop of moisture that would evaporate in seconds. The delivery system was equally subtle. A small, flesh-colored patch worn on the operative's index fingertip, containing a single micro-droplet of the adhesive solution that would be released by a minute increase in pressure. The detection side of the system consisted of a network of portable gamma-ray spectrometers, each the size of a paperback book. These units were designed to be concealed within ordinary urban objects: a street cleaner's cart, a tourist's backpack, a municipal waste bin, or a maintenance worker's toolbox. Their detection range was limited, typically no more than 10 meters, which meant that tracking the tagged object would require a coordinated, leapfrogging surveillance effort, with teams constantly moving to stay within the faint bubble of the marker's emission. The entire system was a closed loop of bespoke technology, from the atomic level of the marker to the sophisticated software that would triangulate its position from the detector network, representing a significant investment of scientific and financial resources for a single, one-time use. The human component selected for this high-stakes task was the operative known as Alara, though she had lived as Anna Fisher for the past 187 days. Her recruitment into the directorate had been unorthodox. She was not from a military or law enforcement background, but was instead a former signals intelligence analyst, a linguist with a rare gift for pattern recognition and an eidetic memory that allowed her to recall vast strings of code or pages of text after a single viewing. Her psychological profile, compiled during her assessment, highlighted an extraordinary capacity for emotional compartmentalization and a deep, almost preternatural patience. These were the qualities that made her ideal for a deep cover assignment that would consist of long periods of intense boredom, punctuated by moments of extreme stress. Her motivation was a quiet, cold fury that she never articulated, but which was well understood by her handler. 7 years prior, a distant cousin, a person she had been exceptionally close to, had been killed in a bombing at a train station, an attack carried out by the ideological antecedents of the Hydra network. This personal history was not exploited by the directorate, but was acknowledged as the bedrock of her commitment. Her training for Operation Midas was rigorous and comprehensive. She spent 3 months at a remote directorate training facility, where she was deconstructed from an analyst and rebuilt into a field operative. The training was relentlessly practical. She learned the art of surveillance and counter-surveillance, not from textbooks, but by spending weeks on the streets of a foreign city, tasked with tracking veteran instructors who were actively trying to lose her. She mastered the subtle techniques of creating and breaking contact, of using crowds for cover, and of blending into her environment until she became part of the scenery. Her physical training focused on stamina and the control of her own physiological responses to stress. Learning to regulate her heart rate and breathing through biofeedback exercises. The psychological conditioning was the most intense part of her preparation. She underwent simulated interrogations and stress scenarios designed to test the limits of her endurance and the resilience of her cover story. The goal was to embed the Anna persona so deeply that it would become her default response under pressure, an autonomic defense mechanism that would protect the core operational knowledge she carried. The construction of the Anna Fisher legend was an exercise in meticulous detail, a work of fiction so thoroughly researched and backstopped that it could withstand intense scrutiny. The Directorate's Legends Department spent 2 months building her identity before she ever set foot in Vienna. They chose the persona of an art history student because it provided a plausible and non-threatening justification for her presence and behavior. It explained why she spent hours alone in public places, why she carried sketchbooks, and why her patterns of life were solitary and slightly eccentric. A full digital and physical history was fabricated. University records were created at the University of Graz, complete with transcripts, a student identification number, and a glowing letter of recommendation from a professor who also did not exist. A modest bank account was opened in her name, funded by a fictitious scholarship. A small apartment was rented for her in the Josefstadt district, and it was filled with the props of her life. Academic texts on Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele, half-finished charcoal sketches, tubes of oil paint, and the faint, lingering scent of turpentine. Her patterns of life were established with painstaking care over her first few months in the city. She visited the same bakery every Tuesday and Friday, checked out books from the same local library, and attended a weekly life drawing class. These routines were designed to build a layer of perceived normalcy, to make her a familiar and unremarkable fixture in her neighborhood. She even acquired a cat, a ginger tabby named Gustav, from a local shelter. The animal was more than a companion. It was a prop, a powerful signifier of domesticity and permanence that further anchored her legend. Her handler communicated with her through a series of carefully orchestrated dead drops, never meeting her in person. Instructions were passed via microdots, hidden in the classified section of a specific newspaper she purchased every Wednesday. She, in turn, would leave her surveillance reports in the form of coded annotations written in the margins of art books that she would donate to a particular second-hand bookstore. The entire support structure around her was designed to be invisible, allowing her to operate with the appearance of total isolation while being constantly, if distantly, monitored and supported. The legend was her armor and her camouflage, a fragile construct of lies that was her only defense in a city where she was both the hunter and the hunted. The operation moved from its passive preparation phase into a state of heightened readiness, based on a single cryptic message from the Directorate source within the Hydra network's periphery. The message, relayed through a chain of intermediaries and stripped of all but its essential meaning, indicated a consignment of rare editions. Was scheduled for transfer in Vienna within the next 72 hours. This was the pre-agreed code for a high-level courier exchange. While the message did not specify the exact location, it provided a critical piece of geographical context. The exchange would occur in a place associated with old paper and leather, a classic piece of tradecraft pointing towards a library or, more likely, an antiquarian bookshop. A team of analysts cross-referenced this clue with Silas's known, albeit limited, operational preferences. He favored locations that were quiet, had multiple exits, and were filled with non-threatening clientele, primarily older academics or tourists. This process narrowed the list of potential sites from hundreds to a dozen high-probability locations. Field surveillance teams, operating under the guise of municipal workers and university students, were discreetly deployed to monitor these locations. Alara, living as Anna, received her activation signal. The message was simple, conveyed by the appearance of a specific type of chalk mark on a lamppost on her daily route to the local market. From that moment, her routine was subtly altered. While maintaining the outward appearance of her established pattern of life, she began carrying the Midas applicator, the small, flesh-colored patch on her right index finger, which was itself covered by a simple bandage, as if for a minor cut. Her instructions were to visit 3 of the highest probability locations each day, spending no more than an hour in each, behaving exactly as an art student researching historical architecture might. The tension of this phase was immense. She was a live weapon, waiting for a target to appear, maintaining a state of relaxed alertness that was psychologically exhausting. The directorate's local station, operating from a secure location in a different city, coordinated the wider surveillance net. Technical teams began pre-positioning the concealed gamma-ray detectors along likely egress routes from the target locations. A delicate and complex choreography of agents and equipment moving through the city, all of it invisible to the public. The entire apparatus of a major intelligence operation was now in motion. Its success or failure balanced on the knife's edge of a single, fleeting human interaction. On the second day of the activation period, late in the afternoon, Silas walked into an antiquarian bookshop on the Kärntner Ring. The confirmation came from a spotter positioned in a cafe across the street, relayed through a covert communications link to Alara's handler, and then to her via a simple, one-way pager disguised as a digital fitness tracker on her wrist. The device vibrated twice. The pre-arranged signal for "Target has entered your location." Alara was already inside the shop, browsing a section on Baroque cartography. Her heart rate, which she had trained herself to control, remained steady at 72 beats per minute. Outwardly, she was calm, a student lost in a world of old maps. Inwardly, every one of her senses was heightened to an almost painful degree. She registered the faint scent of decaying paper and binding glue, the precise location of the shop's other 3 patrons, the slight squeak of the floorboard near the entrance, and the subtle shift in airflow as the door opened and closed. She did not look at Silas directly. Instead, she used the reflections in the glass-fronted bookcases to observe him. He matched the description perfectly. Tall, lean, with nondescript features, and clothing that was neither cheap nor expensive, designed to be forgettable. He carried a worn leather satchel. He moved with a quiet economy of motion, his eyes scanning the space with a practiced, unobtrusive gaze. The operational plan, which had been rehearsed mentally hundreds of times, now began to unfold in real time. A second directorate operative, a man posing as a clumsy tourist, was positioned near the front of the shop. On a signal from the spotter outside, a man raising a specific colored newspaper, the tourist would create a diversion. Alara's task was to position herself between Silas and the exit, using the diversion to close the distance and make the touch. The waiting was the hardest part. For 3 minutes, that felt like an eternity. Silas browsed a section on military history, his back to her. He pulled out a heavy, leather-bound volume, opened it, and slipped a thin, manila envelope from his satchel between its pages before returning it to the shelf. This was the drop. He then turned and began to walk towards the exit. The signal was given. As Silas approached the narrow aisle leading to the door, the operative posing as a tourist stumbled, as if his shoelace had become caught on the leg of a display table. He fell against a tall, precarious stack of antique encyclopedias. The books cascaded to the floor with a loud, crashing thud that startled everyone in the shop. The incident was perfectly engineered to create a moment of chaos and a physical bottleneck. The shop owner cried out in alarm. The other patrons turned to stare. For a critical 2-second window, every eye in the room was drawn to the manufactured drama. This was Alara's moment. She had already begun moving towards the exit, as if to leave, her path timed to intercept Silas's. As he paused, momentarily blocked by the tourist who was now apologizing profusely and scrambling to gather the fallen books, Alara squeezed past him in the constricted space. "Entschuldigung," she murmured. "Excuse me." The quintessential polite, anonymous apology of a crowded city. In that instant, her right hand, the one with the bandaged finger, brushed against the side of his leather satchel. The pressure was infinitesimal, the contact so brief it was indistinguishable from the dozens of other accidental touches a person might experience in a day. The micro-droplet of lutetium in 177 laced adhesive, colorless and odorless, was transferred to the worn leather. Silas barely registered her presence. His attention, like everyone else's, focused on the commotion ahead. He sidestepped the mess and exited the shop. The entire act had taken less than a second. It was a perfect, invisible wound inflicted upon the enemy's communication line. Alara did not look back. She exited the bookshop 30 seconds after Silas, her pace unhurried. Her immediate objective was to follow her pre-planned sanitization and extraction protocol. She walked 2 blocks north, turned onto a side street, and entered a public library, a location chosen for its anonymity and lack of security cameras at the entrance. Inside the restroom, she removed the bandage and the applicator patch, placing them into a small, foil-lined pouch designed to block any residual emissions. She then meticulously washed her hands with a special solvent from a small vial in her purse, a chemical agent that would break down any remaining traces of the adhesive. Her part in the active phase of Operation Midas was over. She was now simply Anna Fisher again, an art student leaving a library. She took a tram to a different part of the city and spent the rest of the afternoon sketching in a park, a deliberate act of public normalcy. She would remain in Vienna for another 3 weeks, maintaining her cover before being quietly exfiltrated. The operational baton had been passed to the technical surveillance teams. The moment Silas left the bookshop, the hunt began. A detector concealed in a street maintenance cart a block away registered the first faint gamma-ray signature. The signal was weak but unmistakable. The hunt was on. The system worked exactly as designed, with teams leapfrogging each other, passing off the surveillance from one concealed detector to the next as Silas moved through the city on foot and by tram, the invisible bubble of radiation traveling with him. The immediate aftermath of the tagging was a tense, high-stakes tracking operation that spanned 3 countries. The technical teams followed the faint isotopic signature of the lutetium-177 as Silas moved through Vienna's public transport system. The signal led them to the Wien Hauptbahnhof, the city's main train station, where it remained stationary in a luggage locker for 4 hours. A classic cooling-off period designed to detect and shake any physical surveillance. Silas was never seen again. He had handed off the package. Late that evening, the signal began to move again, this time aboard a night train bound for Prague. The Directorate alerted its counterpart service in the Czech Republic, feeding them real-time location data. The package, now carried by a new, unknown courier, was tracked from Prague's main station to a nondescript apartment building in the Žižkov district. Under the guidance of the Directorate's technical advisors, a Czech tactical police unit, equipped with a handheld spectrometer, was able to pinpoint the exact apartment. The subsequent raid was swift and precise. They captured not only the second courier, but also a man believed to be a key logistics officer for the Hydra network. More importantly, they seized the package itself. Inside the manila envelope, concealed within the hollowed-out pages of an old book, was a set of encrypted flash drives and a handwritten ledger. The decrypted drives contained what the Directorate had been desperately seeking: detailed plans for the coordinated attacks, including target lists, timings, and the names of the operational cells in Berlin and Brussels. The ledger contained the network's financial records, a roadmap of their money laundering operations. The intelligence was a decisive blow, allowing German and Belgian authorities, acting on the shared information, to dismantle the local cells before they could act. The long-term strategic value was immeasurable. The recovered data provided a comprehensive blueprint of the Hydra network's structure, finances, and personnel, leading to dozens of arrests across Europe over the following months and effectively neutralizing the organization. The political and diplomatic repercussions were handled with extreme discretion. The success of the operation was never made public, attributed officially to routine police work. For Alara, the psychological cost was subtle but profound. The transition from the hypervigilance of the mission back to a normal existence was jarring. The silence of her post-operational life felt unnatural. And for months, she found herself subconsciously analyzing crowds, looking for threats that were no longer there. The operation raised deep ethical questions within the Directorate about the use of such invasive, undetectable technologies, and the moral calculus of weighing the prevention of a future atrocity against the methods used to achieve it. Operation Midas was deemed a resounding success, not because a single courier was caught, but because a ghost was made visible, and an entire chain of violence was broken by a single, imperceptible touch in a quiet Vienna bookshop. Is it truly justifiable to deploy technologies that erase the very concept of personal privacy, even if the goal is to prevent a greater tragedy? At what point do the methods used to protect a society begin to erode the very freedoms that society is meant to uphold? Share your thoughts below. If you found this story compelling, please give this video a like and subscribe to our channel.